as bad as we say things are in this country, I can name 10 other places that are extremely worse, that I would much rather have American problems than problems that other countries may have. And that lets you know that you're living in a level of decadence in the fact that you have literal first world problems. And because of those first world problems, you have lost sight of what is actually important.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Harish Singhani. This is Conversations with Haresh. We'll be talking to people of varied backgrounds, covering various topics. I'm very excited to be able to share these with you. The goal is to increase curiosity and empathy amongst all of us to help us grow professionally and personally at all levels. And of course, we also want to make sure that this is fun. So thank you again, and we'll look forward to having you.
Hi, good morning, Jamar.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing really well. Excited to have this episode and learn a little bit about what you're doing and where you've been, where you're going. But it's summer. It's a beautiful morning in Seattle. I believe you're also in Seattle.
Yes.
How's the summer been for you, by the way?
Busy, but great. Busy, but great. Yeah.
Awesome. Travels, family?
Travel, speaking, work, all of the above. What about yourself?
Similar. We had the biggest family event was my daughter was home for a couple of months after she finished her college. And then also my mother-in-law visited for, I think, maybe a month and a half. So we had some good family time, and we only have one kid. So that was our entire family. Yeah, our daughter is our family.
Congratulations on your daughter graduating college.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
What does she study?
She is a computer nerd or computer science major. She also likes oceans, so she combined marine biology and computers, and she's got her first gig in San Francisco. And this week was her first week actually down there. So a couple of weeks ago, we were down there on a road trip and doing all the runs to Costco and other stores and IKEA to get her set up.
Absolutely. You get her own Costco card or?
Yeah, she probably doesn't need it yet because her apartment's too small. And then also you need a little bit of size of a family for you to really be able to leverage a Costco card.
Yeah.
And if you're living in an urban area like San Francisco in a smaller place, Costco is hard to go shop at. But just for a few things, it was a good way to start there.
Yeah.
So in terms of, I guess, some of the topics I had alluded to cover, I know you're a man of many domains and talents and engagements, from volunteering, multiple causes, working, speaking. So would love an brief intro of the person, the professional, the citizen, etc., whatever you think is going to be relevant so that our listeners can get an idea about Jamar.
Absolutely. To introduce myself to your audience. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Jamar Montgomery. I am a multi-passionate, multi-hyphenate genius, and I got my start at 11 years old taking my first college class at Rio Hondo Community College. I started college full-time at 14. I graduated at 19 with my bachelor's in mechanical engineering from Cal State LA. I went on to work for the United States Navy for just under 5 years. The system that is currently shooting down drones in the Red Sea on Navy ships, that is my system.
Oh, wow.
While I was working as an engineer, I volunteered with the NAACP. Most people call it the NAACP. I volunteered with the NAACP as Chair of Legal Redress, and my mentor encouraged me to go to law school. I was in a point in my career where I was looking for a change. I had just managed the biggest mission of my career, and that mission was when Kim Jong-un was launching his first ballistic missiles. I was sent as part of a special team to go outfit the Korean Navy so that they could shoot down those missiles. So I accomplished this major feat in my career that normally people who have higher levels of certification, higher levels of experience are usually sent on. And I was like, you know what? What else is next for me? So my mentor suggested that I go to law school after having me work as Chair of Legal Redress and seeing how powerful the law is when you know how to apply it. I went to law school at Southern University Law Center. While I was there, I also started my MBA. So I was a joint degree program. Graduated with my law degree, graduated with my MBA, then went to teach political science at Southern University Shreveport, then started practicing law as a juvenile public defender. So I worked with kids who had gotten in trouble. And while I was there, while practicing law, I ran for United States Senate in the 2020 elections.
Wow. How was that?
An incredible, life-changing, stressful, disheartening, encouraging experience all in one. You really get an idea of why our political system is the way that it is, and you start to understand why your politicians do certain things.
Wow. So that was 2020. So it's been a few
Yep.
more years. What kind of other things have you been doing? Are you still fairly active politically, or?
I'm always active politically. I'm always active politically. Not as much as campaigning, but I'm always politically active. Since then, I have advised Kanye West, former President Donald Trump in 2022. I was giving a speech during the World Economic Forum on utilizing blockchain in politics in 2023, was teaching and lecturing on digital identity and utilizing blockchain in Nigeria. I was asked to support a couple delegations during the G7 in Hiroshima, Japan in 2023. And in 2024, I was asked to speak on the integration of blockchain and AI again at the World Economic Forum during the World Economic Forum. So outside of that, I help startups, I mentor startups. I have my own watch company that I build my own watches, J. Montgomery watches. So I have my shirt on right now. You wear your watch
Excellent.
to let you know what time it is. I wear my watch to let you know how expensive my time is.
Ah,
Yes,
time is life, right? Time is money, as the saying goes, but more time is life.
absolutely. Absolutely. So I've been up to a number of things since then. And the most recent thing I would say is giving a speech on the human element of AI at MoHi. And of course, where we met at the Tech Wealth and Innovation Summit, once again, speaking about AI. So I have been very busy over the last, my entire life.
Yeah, of course. Sounds like it. It sounds like you're doing at least 5 times as much as what many of us, the rest of us are doing at any given point. But what an amazing journey so far and amazing set of experiences. I could probably be here for hours and hours picking at, going deeper into many of the things that you mentioned. One of the things that is a very interesting topic for society at large right now is artificial intelligence. And of course, we're in very interesting political and civic times, right? At least in the United States, that's another interesting, super interesting topic.
Yes.
And maybe these are not unrelated.
Yes.
Of course, there's big climate changes there, right?
Yes.
That's in some ways, it's such a big topic that it's got many subtopics, including energy and transportation, shipping, manufacturing, home building, and all these things, which are intertwined or subsets of climate change, or they affect and interact with climate change.
Yes.
So a slight logistical question. Do you sleep?
I do. I do. My wife gets on me about making sure that I get enough sleep because I feel like I'm resting and then come to find out I haven't actually rested. So yes, I do. I sometimes I have to force myself because the things I love, many of the things that I do, I love doing. And so it doesn't necessarily feel like work. And I love learning. And so I might pull on a thread on something and dive deep in something and 4 hours, 5 hours have passed. And so I feel it in the morning, but I'm loving more and more of what I do, and I'm doing more of the things that I love. Yeah.
Wow, that's good. Yeah, it's important that we take care of ourselves so that we could do the marathon instead of
Yes.
flaming out after a sprint. Okay, it's the season. Politics is the season. So while staying constructive, what do you see as the some of the gotchas or challenges coming up, as well as some of the biggest opportunities that are facing us as society and as citizens, how to navigate the times we're in?
The biggest gotchas would be that people do not know what their actual interests are.
Mm-hmm.
They do not know what their actual interests are because they have not did a real deep dive of what they are willing to live for, what they're willing to strive for, what they're willing to die for, what they're willing to fight for. We have not, as an American people, have not thought about those kinds of things. And one of the reasons why we have not thought about those kinds of things is because, as bad as we say things are in this country, I can name 10 other places that are extremely worse, that I would much rather have American problems than problems that other countries may have. And that lets you know that you're living in a level of decadence, and the fact that you have literal first world problems. And because of those first world problems, you have lost sight of what is actually important. And so you allow all these other tangential and intersectional things to influence your decisions. Now, mind you, our interests are very nuanced, but many times we do not dig deep into where those emotions come from. So we get emotional about things instead of recognizing, is this actually my interest? Is this something that I need to actually be fighting for? Do we need to be fighting for climate change? Absolutely, we need to be fighting for climate change. Do we need to be fighting for better AI infrastructure? Absolutely. But some of these other topics that we get very emotional about, we have to really dig deep into, how does this affect me? And we have limited priorities. We have limited time. We have infinite resources, but the resources that we have control over right now are limited. So with those limited resources, with my limited time, with my limited energy, with my limited attention, what am I going to focus on? And those are the things that as an American people, we have not done. And partly the issue is how our news and our information is brought to us. And you will see that there is a level of manipulation of the American people based upon, we have limited news outlets. And what do I mean by that? Because one can say there's the internet. Absolutely, there's the internet. But I'm just saying in terms of mainstream media or commercial media outlets outside of America, and being able to get a better idea of what America looks like to the outside world, and what are the things that the outside world is talking about that Americans are absolutely oblivious to. And that would help give Americans a little bit more context into the petty fights that we have going on in our political system, the absolute divisiveness of our political system, in that families and friends are making character judgments based upon who you're voting for as president, as if we shouldn't be more emotional about who our local city council person, who our mayor is going to be, who our governor is going to be, who our state representatives are going to be. Is we should be more emotional about those things than we are about our particular presidential candidates. And so just the level of divisiveness in politics, and just the nastiness and demonization of people based upon who you decide to vote for or don't vote for, I think is absolutely foolish. Absolutely foolish.
So, in terms of how do we get from here to there, right? There's obviously a vision of a better state or a better future. So, how do you get there, and what are the things that you're excited about as far as the future, what it seems like or what it looks like from your perspective?
The way that I view it is that the more that your basic needs are taken care of, the more that you can get out of survival mode. The more that you're out of survival mode, the more that you can look past a week, look past a month, look past a year, look past 10 years, look past 20 years. You're able to see farther out the more that your economic and financial needs are taken care of. And as you start to elevate yourself financially, or as your government and others help you elevate financially, you're able to take care of some of those more basic needs and take up care of more needs. And now you get to start focusing on what your wants are. So as long as America allows for wage slaves in the terms of wage growth not growing, however, inflation growing, as long as you have incoherent tax policies that allow for large corporations to utilize public facilities, public infrastructure, but not contribute to the building of that infrastructure, we're going to be in this particular place. I used to be the kind of person, hey, tax the rich, until I became a business owner. And then I started to understand just, oh, okay, I don't mind paying my taxes, but don't tax me out of business. I'm taking a lot of risks during these first 5 years, and the government is unapologetic about taking from me. Fine, help me get through these first 5 years. And because now I am a job creator, I am a job creator. People are depending on me. It's not just me that gets hurt. If something happens to my business, it's not just me that it affects everyone that I have on staff. It affects everyone that I employ. It affects other industries that are dependent on me being in business. So I understand that. But the challenge is that I still also utilize those same roads that everybody else uses.
Of course.
I still utilize that same electrical infrastructure that was subsidized by the American taxpayer. I benefit from these things. So for us as Americans, when we stop limiting ourselves in terms of the resources that we believe are available, there are infinite resources, but it is limited thinking and limited intelligence that is not allowing us to tap into the wealth that's all around us. I will give you a perfect example. Your car was only valuable to you as long as it was helping you get to work or get to your business. But then all of a sudden comes Uber. And now your car becomes valuable even more. Now your car is actually making you money, or you are able to make money with your car. Oh, and then something called Turo comes around. And now your car becomes valuable because you're now able to rent out your car. Oh, guess what? If it's anything that we've learned about the financial industry, is that they will find a way of monetizing incomes. They will find a way of assetizing, of creating an asset out of cash flows.
Of course.
So what have you done? You have created more wealth, or you have unlocked wealth that was sitting there staring you right there in the face. And for Americans, we have to start challenging our basic assumptions about how the world works. We have to start challenging what is being told to us and what is being fed to us, because at the end of the day, when we look at the media, when we look at the political parties, they are marketing to us. And if it's anything about marketing, is that marketing wants you to feel a certain way. And you have to start asking, why do they want me to feel this way? And the moment that you start questioning that is where you start grasping onto the threads and rope of freedom.
Yeah, lots of nuances. Perhaps our age is the age of sound bites with TikTok and Instagram and so on, right? Many platforms, Twitter or X, short form. One of the challenges is to get the nuances out and get people to think in nuances, right? As opposed to headlines or sound bites.
That's not on the marketer, right? That's on the person that receives it, because the marketer is going to give you more of what you want. And if your attention span is only this much, then I have to deal with emotion. I can't deal with logic. So therefore, I'm going to give you something that elicits an emotional response. And of course, what we learned is that there's nuance in emotions, but when you're thinking with your emotions, there is no space for logical nuance.
Do you study history?
I do study history.
Have you studied Robert Caro, the author, by chance? He wrote LBJ's biography, big one, like 4 or 5 volume one.
Master of the Senate?
Yes.
Yeah.
What a book, right? I had a chance to read it a few months ago, maybe a year or two ago. And I think most people would say that they understand how politics and political power works, how Congress works, how Senate works, but we really don't.
Nope.
And Senate, right? What an institution.
Yes.
I almost felt like I was personally transformed after reading that book and some of the other books by Robert Caro, who writes about political power. But to me, and I'm not a huge student of history, but I like history and studying the past, because as the saying goes, if you don't know the past, you're going to repeat it. Even if you know it, you might still repeat it, but you'll be aware that you're repeating it.
Yes.
So in that sense, do you think that we all should know more of the past and the history so that we know where to go or how to get there better? But how do you teach people, or how do you get people more interested in learning the past so that they can better chart the future?
That is a great question. You have to meet people where they're at. And one of the ways that you meet people where they're at is you find out what they're interested in. And you start learning about that history of whatever it is that they're interested in. When you learn that history of the things that they're interested in, you're able to make parallels. And when you're able to make those parallels, then that becomes the bridge for them learning more about the things that actually are going to affect their lives. It is a challenge. It is a challenge because one, you have to care. And that's one, I think one of the issues is that it is costly to care and not necessarily profitable to care.
Yeah, one of the challenges also is that generationally, the youth are typically not as interested because the rebellious part of the youth says that whatever I'm doing, my generation is way better and updated and it's using the latest, greatest widgetry and so on. And so it's so much better. And I don't need to be interested in the past. I don't need to be interested in what your generation, the parents' generation did, or the grandparents or great grandparents and so on. And naturally, as we age, we start seeing patterns and eventually you realize that things haven't and they don't change a lot, right?
Yeah.
And when they do change for the better, it's usually with a lot of effort, sacrifice, and energy, right? And
Yes.
passion that gets poured into it. And sometimes even blood and violent sacrifices are involved. So switching gears a little bit, artificial intelligence. It was talked about quite a bit, I think in the last, about 18 months, 2 years, ever since ChatGPT kind of made a splash as one of the killer apps for AI, at least as far as the consumer is concerned. Of course, I'm in the technology business, and so I've been hearing, or we've been engaging in machine learning and artificial intelligence, and it had other names, expert systems, right? Those things have been going on for decades, and because I'm in technology, my team is in technology, we've been aware of what's happening there. But for kind of the lay person or the consumer, I think in the last 18 months to 24 months, we've been talking about it, hearing about it a lot more. And then whenever the layperson is, in some ways, it's a little bit of a sad story that politicians, they start caring after lay people start caring, as opposed to being sometimes the leaders. It's a big domain, big topic, and there are many different aspects to artificial intelligence, from governance around privacy and other challenges that it presents to economic issues, job displacements, and so on. Do you personally fear artificial intelligence?
No, I don't fear artificial intelligence. And what we actually fear are, we don't even fear bad people utilizing artificial intelligence. What we actually fear are when good people or the person next to us or the person that we think we know decides to go bad and utilize AI.
So AI being a multiplier, right? It's going to make all of us more powerful. So if you have bad intentions, it's going to get scarier. And then, as you're saying, the good people have to be that much more motivated.
It's not so much just that the good people have to be much more motivated. And let me think about it in this way. Let me help you understand in this way. You go through a bad neighborhood, right? You go through a bad neighborhood. You're locking your doors. You're making sure that all your valuables are out of sight. You expect for bad things to happen, so you're on guard. If something bad happens to you, that's just what it is. They're like, I prepared, but this is just what it is. But let's say you're in a good neighborhood. You're off guard. You're not worried about anything, but all of a sudden it's a person who loves to throw bricks. The person that you're just having a conversation with throws a brick at your car. Totally unexpected. Can't prepare for it. And it's terrifying because now, guess what? You're never going to walk into a situation, and you will never trust a situation that looks calm, that looks like it's inviting. Did I explain that? Did I explain that clear enough?
You're saying that, is it like taking for granted or being too comfortable and complacent is a risk?
We are afraid of being complacent with people that we don't necessarily know, or we are afraid of being complacent with people that we do know but don't necessarily know to trust. So I'm saying the cute little kid, and you find out that he's Dennis the Menace. The kid that you know has been getting in trouble and all of that, you already know how to prepare for him. But the cute little kid that is actually Dennis the Menace, you have no way of.
So what should we do?
What should we do? We should continue all the work that we need to do, all the improvement that we need to do happens internally. And literally forcing, not even forcing, but doing the continual work on being the best self that we can be. Recognizing our own shortcomings, recognizing the more that we understand and the more that we are able to see ourselves, the better and clearer we're able to see the world.
Got it.
And when we start to do more of that internal work of understanding ourselves, understanding our tendencies, understanding the things that we may not like about ourselves or the things that we want to change about ourselves. When we start to understand those things, our lower tendencies,
Got it.
when we understand that and we start to continue to work on ourselves with those things, we start to make a better world around us. And when you do the work for yourself, you feel better, right? You become a better person, but everyone else is a beneficiary of that. And that's the problem, is that many people are not doing that internal work that's necessary so that everyone else can benefit.
Got it. Okay.
I hope I explained that clearly.
I think so. If I understand correctly, it's that the onus is on us. There's no free lunch, right? So there's no solution that we're going to get from a politician or from a platform provider, whether it's one of the mega techs. We're probably not going to get a solution from pharma either, I'm guessing, right? In the
Exactly.
pill,
Exactly.
right? That's another domain, right? Learn how to be healthy, physically healthy, mentally healthy. That's a huge source of stress for Americans. One of the things that is happening in America, when you were talking about what's happening in America and how sometimes we're not as aware of where we've been, where we're going, and how we're perceived outside of the country, etc. We're massively stressed. At least that's what I've heard when I go to other countries in terms of, or you can see it on their faces. People are happier when you visit other countries, many countries, not necessarily all countries. We're pretty stressed. And I think statistics show that, but we have anecdotes. All of us have personal anecdotes about the stress level felt by people around us and maybe including ourselves. And it's a little bit ironic because, like you're saying, I don't think we're short of resources, right? So if the source of stress would be tied to scarcity of resources, we should not be stressed at all as a society, right? Because we're probably the richest ever has existed and currently right now in the world. Any thoughts or suggestions on how do we feel happier?
I don't think that we have gratitude.
I see.
I think we lack gratitude, and because of our lack of gratitude and context, it's difficult for many Americans to find happiness. And we have the wrong definition of what success is, or we index heavily on certain definitions of success,
Mm-hmm.
and we tie our happiness with those definitions of success, only to find out later that doesn't actually make you happy.
Mm-hmm.
When you realize that every day that you have is a gift from God,
Mm-hmm.
and that tomorrow is not promised to anyone, it forces you to open up the aperture to what you're experiencing now and what you're able to change now. Recognize that things don't have to stay the same. If you look all around you, if you look at any person that is over 70, over 80, over 90, they are not the same person that they were when they were 30 years old. Meaning, things can change, and things can change either for the better or things can change for the worse. And are you putting yourself on a track for things to change for the better? But once again, if you're in survival mode, you're not thinking. It's crazy. When you're in survival mode, you experience now, and the only thing that you're thinking about is now. You can't even think about the future.
Of course.
When you're outside of survival mode, it would be great if you're able to experience now and also think about the future.
Yeah.
But what often happens is where a lot of our unhappiness comes is we're not able to experience the now because we're so focused on thinking on the future.
Yeah.
I know that from personal experience. And the moment that I started to bring in my aperture to think about what was going on with me now and feeling those things now and experiencing my world now, I was able to have a brighter outlook on my future. If things weren't how I wanted them now, I was able to recognize things don't have to be the same in the future. And let me think and meditate on the things on how I want them to be in the future.
Okay. Okay.
So, Americans, yes, we are stressed. We are stressed. Who wouldn't be stressed? The television, you turn on the television and they're telling you that this person is going to cause the world to end, and this person is going to be the end of democracy, this person is going to rob you of your job, or this technology is going to rob you of your job. You're bombarded with all these negative messages, and you feel as if all these things are so much bigger than you. And in a sense, they are bigger than you, but we give up control over the things that we actually have control over. We voluntarily give that control over.
Right.
I can't do anything about what my representatives do, but you know what I can do? I can vote for better representatives.
Sure.
So I think a lot of our unhappiness comes from we feel that we've given up a lot of control over things that we shouldn't have given up control over.
I see.
We've made a lot of other people responsible for our happiness. We've made other people responsible for our security. We've made other people responsible for our prosperity. We've made other people responsible. And think about this. You got 400 million Americans who have given up their responsibility for making themselves healthy, for making themselves happy. And you, as a politician, have to come up with hopefully the best solution that benefits the most amount of people and hurts the least amount of people.
Makes sense.
So when we start taking more responsibility and accountability and ownership of those things, I think that we'll find a lot more happiness.
Okay. Yeah, I guess there's no quick fix. Maybe that's the theme. Right.
It is no quick fix. And that's the problem, is the moment that you recognize that you got a problem, you want a quick fix.
Right, of course.
It took you a while to get into this problem and to get into this situation. It's going to take a little time for you to be able to get out of it.
Excellent. Given that, I guess it's one of the aspects of our times, and just that both you and I being racial minorities in the U.S., on your radar, I'm assuming that racial inequity, or how to create more equity, racial is one part, but just in general, probably gets discussed or brought up many a time. So how do you go from where we are to a better place of equity between role models? Or in the last few years in the corporate world, one of the things that we run into in what we do a lot, one of the things our team does is that we help clients with technology projects. We also have a talent practice that curates talent or recruits talent for our clients. And so diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI initiatives are things that we become aware of that our clients have. It's probably being talked about slightly less now than maybe a year or two back. Socioeconomic equity and racial equity and gender equity, etc., is always there. A lot of work remains, right? It's not that because of after the Civil War 150 years ago and then after civil rights 50 years ago that we're done with all this stuff. It still remains a lot of work that remains. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on two things. One is, what are the biggest pain points right now? And then what might be some ways to get better?
What are the biggest pain points right now, and how do we make it better?
Yeah.
One is recognizing in America, I am a minority. In America, I'm a minority. Globally, I am not, right? So it doesn't benefit me to see myself as a minority. It does not benefit me to see myself as a minority or to think of myself as a minority at all. Now, from a DEI perspective, the attacks on DEI is representative of people being afraid that other people are now going to have input.
Right. Power sharing.
How it has been implemented is the problem. DEI is a good thing. How it has been implemented is the problem. What happens is DEI allows for intersectionality. And what people are doing is they're trying to find double minorities. Okay. Oh, you're black and you're a woman. Okay, you check off 2 boxes. Oh, you're black, you're a woman, and you're part of the LGBT community. Oh, you check off 3 boxes. Now, what does that have to do with that person's qualifications for the job? That's one thing. I have a problem with DEI in the sense of, if you're going to say that you want more black engineers, if you say that you want more female engineers, if you say you want more black female or black male engineers from certain backgrounds, I don't see these companies heavily recruiting at the HBCUs. Not just recruiting, but creating pipelines of saying, hey, This is the kind of talent that I need, and I want to cultivate it. I want to cultivate it here. Because how DEI has been attacked has been on people's qualifications.
Mm,
One of the worst things that somebody can call you is a DEI hire,
sure.
right? Now, if you're a DEI hire, does it mean that you're unqualified? No, but that's the stigma that's attached to it. So now the vilification and the villainization of being of DEI happens to deal with, do we have representation for representation's sake, or do we have representation because this allows us access to another market? This allows us to look at business from a different perspective and take advantage of this particular perspective. And then, are we committed, not necessarily to DEI, but are we committed to now also employing the same people that we're marketing to? If you're marketing to gay people, but you're not hiring gay people, that's a problem. If you're marketing to black people, but you're not hiring black people, that's a problem. If you're not marketing to black people and you're not hiring black people, okay, right? Now, on the other hand, let's say you're a defense company. You're not marketing to black people. You're not marketing to white people. You're marketing to all of America. Does your workforce look like America? And are you contributing to your workforce looking like America? Because why? You're utilizing my tax dollars are what pays the salaries. And so when I look at DEI from that perspective, as a federal contractor, I would hope that you look like the people who make up this federal government.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
So that's what I expect. But I don't expect for you to do not buy where you cannot be hired.
Sure, sure. Makes sense. Sometimes one of the constraints people talk about when people ask or people get asked, decision makers or executives in different companies, as to why is your workforce not more reflective of your client base or of the country as a whole, they allude to something you alluded to earlier, which is we want more people from all walks of life, but the pipeline doesn't look good, right? Or it doesn't have enough diversity. So if the front of the funnel doesn't have enough diversity, then the rest of the stages of the talent funnel, you won't have a representative sample of the country, right? Or of the market. And so how do we improve, let's say, DEI demographic or DEI audiences getting into more STEM fields, for example, or into more finance and other domains that historically have had fewer of them?
That's a great question. The companies, once again, are not recruiting at HBCUs. HBCU stands for Historically Black College or University. I went to what is known as a PWI, which is a predominantly white institution. I went to a state school for my undergrad, and I went to HBCU for law school and for my MBA. Those companies come to the HBCUs after they've gone to the PWIs. They come to the HBCUs after they've already gone to the LSUs. They're looking for literally exceptional talent at the HBCUs. If I saw JP Morgan and Citibank actually actively recruiting and building relationships on campus, I would understand that. But I don't see that. Why would the pipeline be there if the only time that you get there is a few drops? They're not interested. They say that what it is, and I understand it. Hiring people is a challenging process.
Of course.
Finding good people is a challenging process. But you want to know something about hiring at an HBCU is that you have a hungry, talented workforce that is looking for an opportunity. I don't have to pay an HBCU grad as much as I pay somebody that comes from Yale or Harvard. However, are you, JP Morgan, helping to establish key metrics and key things that those students need to learn in order to work those jobs? And I will say that one of the schools that is doing it great has been Morgan State. Morgan State has a trading desk. They have a trading desk. They have built partnerships with large banks and financial institutions. They're an example of an HBCU doing it right. However, I'm going to say that it's on the HBCU's part and it's also on these companies' part. And if you're not going to the HBCUs, if you're going to the HBCUs last, then of course you're going to say, we couldn't find anybody.
Okay. And what about in the K through 12 ecosystem? How do we inspire more people, more kids into STEM fields when they may have fewer role models from previous generations who've been in those domains?
Oh, man. K through 12 is rough. And the reason why K through 12 is rough is because the family environment that the kids grow up in are a major determinant on that kid's success. Give you an example. You have a kid that doesn't have the best family environment, parents who may or may not be able to help them with their homework. A kid that may not necessarily, when they get home and they're trying to do their homework, it's a noisy and chaotic environment, not a structured environment, but they go to a good school. That kid has to fight so hard against their home life that it would make it difficult for them to be successful in that school. So if we gave him all the opportunity and we don't understand why he's not succeeding, because of the things that are going on at home. When we talk about K through 12, these are one of the things that I understood as a juvenile public defender is we had this thing called wraparound services, where yes, we were dealing with the kid, but we recognized that the family also needed some help and needed some resources as well. With K through 12, you get the greatest ROI on every dollar invested. The challenge becomes on what goes on with that family, what goes on at home, is whether or not those gains at school are sustainable. And particularly in disadvantaged, under-resourced, underrepresented communities, is oftentimes you are in survival mode. These kids are in survival mode. So they're dealing with trauma and they're in survival mode. How are you going to retain anything that you're learning at school? How are you going to have the mindset shift that allows you to be able to see opportunity versus dodging adversity?
Yeah, you got to survive. And I think there were a bunch of data around how once the school started even providing breakfast, it changed student performance, right? And life performance of those kids.
And that was a program that was started by the Black Panthers in the 60s. And so it's interesting to see how the United States government attacked the Panthers, but implemented some of their programs that they had. They used to have free breakfast for all the kids in the neighborhood because they recognized the connection between hungry kids and learning. Something as simple as that. Then to come to find out that this organization, that the Black Panthers was started by college students. So what are we seeing in America? We keep seeing the demonization and villainization of student-run, student-led organizations that might be considered radical, only for certain policies, only for certain programs to be implemented on a grand scale, and the United States government take credit and advantage of it. Once again, being a student of history and recognizing how these things affect.
Well, we've touched on a lot of things. I had mentioned you're welcome to ask me a question or two. Anything we've discussed or anything that you've thought about. But just to recap some of the things you've been saying, there's no free lunch.
There is no free lunch.
There's no quick fix.
There are quick fixes. Are they sustainable?
I see. So symptom management, but it's not going to be a cure, right?
Exactly.
Temporary relief. And so the onus is on all of us to dig deeper, dig those more nuanced solutions or answers to problems that are persisting and do our part, right? Individually. Otherwise, everything else is moot, or we can't expect anything from the system or other people until we're willing to do our part. So I think that's probably what I've learned.
Right now, I don't have anything to add. I have a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, let's do that.
Think of a time where your view of the world or the view of yourself radically shifted. When was a time where your view of the world radically shifted? An example for me was the time that I went to Egypt and saw the pyramids for the first time. When I came back, I was a changed man. I was not the same. Before was seeing myself as an engineer, and then being in Egypt and recognizing that it was people who looked like me who built these pyramids, and how I was taught about who I was in America versus going out and seeing part of African history and my history. And they say everyone fears time, but time fears the pyramids. And to know that what I have been taught about myself, what I have been taught about my lineage, what I thought I knew about my lineage, what I thought I knew about my history, I absolutely knew nothing. And those who were trying to reinforce messages that I was a minority had been lying to me.
So you reclaimed your narrative.
Absolutely.
As opposed to being externally fed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that sounds pretty transformative. And what age was this?
2016, so that's 8 years ago.
I've got a few more years on you, right? So I've had maybe more opportunities to kind of review and re-envision my life or myself and the world. I immigrated from India to the US when I was 13, right? And that was 40 years ago, to Seattle due to family. We had one uncle and aunt and their family in Seattle because my uncle was working in aerospace. Boeing, actually. I think you might have some history with Boeing.
Yep, I do.
So that's how I ended up in Seattle. So when I was in India till I was 13, I studied in a local language. My schooling was in local language called Gujarati, which is a province or a state on the west side of India. It borders Pakistan and the Arabian Sea. It's actually where Narendra Modi is from, the prime minister.
Okay.
I had taken maybe 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade English as like a one class. So I knew some of the basics, the alphabet, the to-be verbs, short sentences, and the tenses and stuff like that. Not at any level of speaking fluency, right? It was all lessons and written and read and stuff like that. So the language was the first shock coming to the US. Immigration, which I realized about 20 years after I was here, that it actually is an experience of loss, right? So you lose your culture, your friends, your city, your language, your food, potentially even your clothes or style of clothes. Of course, you gain the new set, but initially none of that counts because none of that is familiar, none of that connects.
Yeah.
So that was very transformational in terms of redefining and reconnecting with pretty much everything. And being 13 at the time, in a way, it made it easier because when you're 13, you're changing anyway. And you think the world's changing, but you're changing. And so if you change the world at the same time around you, which is what happened to me because of immigration, it doesn't really add that much more because you're changing from inside as well. One of the things that I distinctly remember that was really made an impression on me was we were strictly vegetarians back in India. And then in the US, my family, the family members that were in the US were very liberal. So we didn't try to stay vegetarians once I got to the US. I still remember my first taste of meat and seafood or fish and stuff. And it was disgusting. And I thought at the time, as a 13-year-old kid, that the concept of eating dead animals was actually savage. So it was funny because when I was in India, there were all these preconceived notions or stereotypes of America as being this super enlightened, super orderly, super wealthy, super educated place. And then I was like, why would you eat dead animals? And the only picture I had of dead animals from India was roadkill. So I was like, oh, why would you eat that? Because you didn't see it in anybody's kitchen in kind of a clean version of it. And then it was a beginning of instilling or educating me on the fact that humans are contradictory creatures. They're going to do some very noble and very refined and very sophisticated and civilized things while being extremely savage-like at the same time in some domains, right? But that was clearly a life transformational experience for me, and in some ways it continues to this day. But there have been others. Actually, reading those books about LBJ was a transformational experience in a different way, right? How does political power work? And it's an exercise. Those books accumulated. There were about 4 volumes, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And those books accumulated to be more than 3,000 pages of content. So that gave me an appreciation for the opposite of what is it like to dig into something at a level that's extremely opposite of a soundbite, right? Where you hold that attention span and you're like, I'm going to just keep taking the layers off. And we're so blessed and lucky that we have authors like those around. He's dedicated better part of 50 years to research that and write that. And so, of course, we have a daughter, I have a wife. So there are some transformations in picking those up as relationships. In India, again, I go back to India. Sexism was alive and well when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s over there, as was casteism, right? India, and probably what would be called racism, but they talk more in terms of castes instead of races. Of course, the strife or differences between the religions, right? Not just the castes, right? So all that was there. So when I came to the States, I studied history, U.S. history, as a sophomore in high school in the U.S., right? And And so you learn about the Civil War and a bunch of all the quick version of U.S. history in 2 semesters of high school history, right? You learn about the entire history of the country or the history of the country since revolution or inception. So I was learning about egalitarianism or equality and lack of equality. And yeah, there have been many. Professionally, there was one transformation which was not in the way you might expect. People think, oh, okay, I got a job, I finished my degree. Those are, of course, traditionally or typical transformational experiences. Somewhat relatively young, I got responsible roles once I started working in my 20s. And in one of the roles, the company had a policy of, I think, taking managers or directors, giving them more performance management attention and help and so on. And one of the things that included was a 360-degree reviews, and you probably know those are right. So your peers and your subordinates and your superiors and all these people get to have a say in how you're doing, and then somebody takes all that anonymously and then they put it in a blender and give it back to you to protect the guilty or the innocent, right? Whatever the case may be. So what the feedback came back was 2 things. One was positive, one was negative that were both enlightening. One was that it said that I was not super detail oriented. And I was surprised because I do all my taxes. I've done all my paperwork since beginning of time. By that time, I had gotten the 4 degrees that I have, including 2 in electric engineering, 1 in physics, and 1 in computer science. And I'm like, how can you be not detail oriented and get all these things done? But it was more about like your personality, right? We could do things that have to be done because those are necessary, even if it's not in your personality. But if somebody says, what is your natural personality? Then for me, it'd be like, let somebody else handle the details.
Yeah.
But that was a shocker for me. Second thing that was actually positive, but surprise for me was it said that I handled change and kind of ambiguity, but change really well. And once I saw that, it made sense. But until then, I hadn't really explicitly realized it about myself. I think this is one of the best parts of life, right? Are these transformations which are somewhat synonymous with growth spurts. And sometimes that phase involves adversity or hardship. And oftentimes it's very positive. It could be like a fun experience to go visit the pyramids. Thank you, Jamar. It's been a pleasure. We'll have to have you again. How do people get in touch with you? What's the best way?
www.drjamarmontgomery.com. That's DRJAMAR Montgomery, MONTGOMERY.com. And you'll be able to find some of my watches there.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time again, Jamar. And it's been wonderful. It's been fun. And I look forward to doing it again.
Likewise.